Mexico has always been a place where cultures collide, a country where the past doesn't just linger, it dances on the streets, shouts in cantinas, and laughs in the smoky back rooms of cabarets. It's a land of mestizos, of mixed blood, where Spanish, indigenous, African, and immigrant cultures crash into each other and create something new, something unmistakably Mexican. And then there's the Valdez family, a dynasty of comedy, music, and chaos. If you grew up in Mexico or even remotely paid attention to its entertainment history, you know the names. Tintan, the Pachuco king, the golden god of Mexican cinema, the man who made Spanglish in art form. Don Ramón, the grumpy, lovable, penniless character from El Chavo del Ocho, a man whose comedic suffering somehow felt personal. El Loco Valdés, the wild, manic, unpredictable force of nature who took Mexican television by storm. El Ratón Valdez, the quietest of the bunch, but still a presence in the Mexican entertainment world. These weren't just comedians, they were icons. They were Mexico's version of the Marx Brothers, if the Marx Brothers had grown up speaking Spanish, flirting with rumberas, and breaking every rule in the book. But behind the humor, the big personalities, and the decades of entertainment, there's a story, a deep, twisting ancestry that ties Mexico to Italy, the United States, and back again. Because the Valdez brothers weren't just Mexican. They were a cocktail of cultures, a product of migration, revolution, and reinvention. And it all starts with a woman named Angela Elisa Angelini Stark. If the Valdez brothers were larger than life, then their ancestry was just as legendary. Their grandmother, Angela Elisa Angelini Stark, was an Italian-American woman whose bloodline carried stories from 2 continents. Angela Elisa was born to an Italian father and an American mother. The Angelini name traces back to Italy, a country of poets, painters, and pasta, but also migrants, adventurers, and dreamers. Like many Italians in the 19th and 20th centuries, Angela Elisa's father left the old country for something new. The Italians went everywhere: Argentina, Brazil, the United States, and in this case, Mexico. Her mother, a Stark, came from American roots. That name, Stark, carries weight. It's German in origin, but by the time it reached American soil, it was a melting pot surname, a name carried by immigrants who became part of the great American experiment. Together, the Angelinis and the Starks gave birth to Angela Elisa, a woman who would become the bridge between Mexico and the Old World. Angela eventually settled in Mexico, where she married Rafael Valdez. The Valdez family itself had deep Mexican roots, likely tracing back to Spanish settlers who had arrived in the country generations earlier. But what made this union fascinating was the mix of cultures: European, American, and Mexican bloodlines swirling together in the same family tree. Their son, Rafael Gómez Valdez Angelini, inherited this cultural complexity. He grew up Mexican, but with a grandmother who carried Italian and American heritage in her veins. It was a different kind of mestizaje, one that wasn't just indigenous in Spanish, but infused with the flavors of 3 continents. And when Rafael Gómez Valdez Angelini married Guadalupe Castillo, the next generation was born. The 4 Valdez brothers would take over Mexican entertainment.
El panadero con el pan, el panadero con el pan, el panadero con el pan.
Germán Valdez, better known as Tintan, wasn't just a comedian, he was a movement. In the 1940s and 50s, he took the pachuco culture out of Mexican Americans, the swagger, the suits, the Spanglish, and made it mainstream. But that style, that ease of slipping between cultures, of blending Mexican identity with an American edge, was in his blood. His grandmother was literally half American. His Italian lineage carried a flair for the theatrical, the over-the-top gestures, the deep, romantic voice that made his songs unforgettable. He wasn't just a comedian, he was a musician, a performer, a master of linguistic acrobatics. His pachuco slang, his exaggerated movements, his jazz-infused rhythms all came from this unique fusion of backgrounds. Ramón Valdez was different. He wasn't flashy like Tintán. He wasn't wild like El Loco. He was the underdog. The guy who was always down on his luck, but never lost his dignity. His most famous role, Don Ramón in El Chavo del Ocho, the broke, irritable, but ultimately lovable neighbor whose every debt, every misfortune felt real. He was the guy who never paid rent, who always had an excuse, who got smacked around by Doña Florinda, but somehow always came back with a smirk. But behind that character was a real-life story of resilience. He came from a family of performers, but he wasn't born into wealth. He hustled. He took bit roles, background parts, until he found his voice. And when he finally got that breakthrough role, he became something bigger than a TV character. He became an institution. To this day, Don Ramón is a folk hero. His catchphrases, his mannerisms, even his refusal to bow to authority, all made him the most human character in Mexican comedy. Maybe it was that Italian defiance in his blood, or maybe it was just the survival instincts of a man who had been through it all. Manuel El Loco Valdés was pure chaos. He wasn't a comedian, he was a force of nature. Where Tintán was smooth and poetic, and Don Ramón was subtle and wry, El Loco was insanity personified. He made Mexican television unpredictable. He turned talk shows into surreal experiences. He was Salvador Dali meets Cantinflas meets a lunatic who had just escaped from a mental asylum. And yet, it worked. Because Mexican comedy, at its heart, is about excess, about exaggeration, and that Italian, Mexican, and American blood all merged into a personality that was too big for any one culture. Antonio, El Ratón Valdés, wasn't as famous as his brothers, but he still carried the family legacy. He acted, he performed, he was part of the great comedic machine that his siblings built. But maybe that's the thing about families like this, not everyone needs to be the star. Sometimes being part of the dynasty is enough. The Valdez brothers weren't just comedians. The Valdez brothers were a reflection of Mexico itself. Improvised, chaotic, deeply rooted yet constantly evolving. They were Italian, American, Mexican. They were the product of migration, of culture clashes, of music, of rebellion. They were proof that comedy isn't just about making people laugh. It's about survival, about taking the madness of the world and making it something beautiful. And that, more than anything, is the real legacy of the Valdez bloodline.
Las luces aquí, eso es. Están las luces. Sale. Arnulfo, Arnulfo se despidió de 21 años cabales, gratos recuerdos dejó al pueblo y a los rurales.